It's at 35 after. I'm just going to get started a little bit, just talk about what this series is. I'm Regina Barber DeGraff. I teach physics and astronomy at Western Washington University. And I'm part of, or I created a community ambassador program, which are faculty embedded in each department in the College of Science and Engineering who do equity work and also work with each other. And so that they work with each other on equity efforts. And one of their collaborative efforts, because they do things individually, but one of their collaborative efforts is trying to create a speaker series where we highlight scientists and we want to humanize them. So this is the Humanizing STEM series, because everyone, like, they come and they talk about their work, but what students have said they really love is knowing how, you know, scientists have actually gotten to where they are, but also what they like to do, their hobbies, as well as their science. So we're going to try to use this series to kind of highlight we as humans. So the two, humans that we have here are two Western alumni. The first is Tazeen Muhammad Ali, and she is, I'm going to say right here, she was at the environmental science at Western, and also got an MS, Master's in Science in Civil and Environmental Engineering, is currently an environmental engineer at Washington State Department of Ecology. And she's going to be our first speaker. And the second speaker is Andrea Frost, who is a computer science alumni here. I know her personally when we went to school, and she is amazing. Tazeen, you are also amazing. Sorry, I'm ad-libbing here, and I should read off the thing. And Andrea is a senior software security engineer at Dell Electronics, and got her master's degree here in computer science. So I just welcome to this event. I'm just so excited to hear about your past.
So my name is Tazeen Muhammad Ali, and I just put together a few slides to just help me humanize myself. So I guess I start with this, and I know most of you on the attendees are students, and childhood may seem far away, but I like to remind people of some of the things that come naturally to children that I feel as grown-ups and as scientists we should continue to nurture, because everybody is born a scientist. And even if you choose another field as a profession, all these qualities that children have can be invaluable moving forward. Children are curious, they're always asking questions, they're experimenting, they're uninhibited, they're not limited to practicality, they're learning through play, they're enjoying their gaining of knowledge, they're thinking out of the box, they're persistent, and they're always trying new things. So on the top left is me and my sister, and then the others are pictures of my two girls over the years, just exploring nature and being scientists without knowing that they're being scientists. So I wanted to start off with that, is to just always, there it is. I need to move my, okay. So one of the things that we were asked to talk about is who we are, who am I? And I wanted to emphasize that it's rarely a singular answer. You can't really answer the question of I can't answer the question of who I am without asking where am I from and where have I been? And these are just some pictures of some of the things that, are a big part of my life, my culture, being outside. And the one with the red hat is when I gave a speech. I was asked to speak at the Women's March in 2017. And so when I try to think of all the things that I am, I kind of put together all these words. And the ones in the center, environmental engineer, environmental scientist, government employee, those are the things that people may see when you're in your work setting. But there's so many other parts of you that contribute to either your success or your failures, or what drives you and motivates you. So no one is any one thing, and identity can be many different things. And it is also a good reminder when you're interacting with a new person that there is all these identities and roles they have in the community that you may not know about. So part of my identity is where I'm from. I'm from Kenya, and that answer usually perplexes a lot of people because I obviously don't look like I'm from Kenya. So then I always have to elaborate and say, well, I have Indian heritage, but I've never lived in India. There's 5 generations ago, my ancestors from India migrated to Kenya and settled there. And so I have 5 generations of family that have lived in Kenya. And while we still nurture some of the language and the culture, many of us have never been to India or lived there. I spent most of my childhood in Africa in 3 different countries. And I've now lived in Washington State for 20 years. So I've lived here more than any other place. So the question of where is home is not always easy to answer. And then that's where I'm from and where have I been. This map just shows places I have lived. It should be black in the key. And then places I've visited are in kind of the reddish color. I lived in Kenya, Botswana, and Egypt. My dad was a civil engineer and he used to work for a Dutch company doing water and irrigation projects in different countries. And so we had the privilege of tagging along. It didn't always feel like a privilege when you're moving 7 schools and making new friends, but looking back, I think that it was an amazing experience that's pretty unique. And so all these things contribute to some of, part of my worldview. I had multicultural exposure attending international schools, which showed me strength and diversity. I was exposed to alternative worldviews, which gave me perspective and open-mindedness. My family, at least especially my dad, was pretty adventurous. He couldn't sit still. So whenever we would be in a new place, it'd be like, let's go to the neighboring country. Let's go travel here, or let's go camping. So he was always wanted to explore and see new places. And so we got to see a lot of interesting things, from deserts to beaches to urban areas and all different ecosystems. And it gave me a really deep kind of sense of awe for the earth and people's diverse relationships to nature, which also gives me hope because there's so many ways that humans interact with nature. At the same time, I think that it showed me, well, what counts as experience. When you're applying for jobs, you're looking at kind of hard skills, but I think that experience should be more broad and holistic. What kind of knowledge and education gets valued and devalued? I think in the academic world, your degrees and where you got them they're not insignificant, but also the sort of knowledge and education you get by observing your community and your surroundings and what your parents and your grandparents share with you in stories, and the people that raise you are all valuable forms of knowledge and education that often get devalued. And I'd encourage you to kind of dig back and see what are those things in your life that you don't consider as conventional knowledge or education that contributes to your sense of self and your sense of community. And then, everybody has blinders. And so I'm always asking myself, what blinders do I have on? And how does my experience limit my perception, perspective, and ideas? We weren't supposed to talk too much about science, but I do some pretty cool things at work. I'm an environmental engineer, and my undergrad is in water quality, freshwater ecology. And I work on a team where we use mathematical models that either simulate water quality or hydrology and water movement, and we use statistics and data analysis. And this image on the right is one of the models that the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory developed for Department of Ecology in collaboration with us. And it just shows, in the blue is freshwater, and the red is higher salinity and saltier water. So you can see all the rivers in the Salish Sea over a 10-day cycle in June 2014. And the circulation in the Salish Sea is pretty critical to the health of the Salish Sea and analyzing water quality problems. So the models that we use help us answer questions like, why are oxygen levels low in Puget Sound? Or how is urbanization affecting aquatic health? How much of the problem that we see in water quality is due to human activities? And what do we know about the sources, and how much do these pollution sources need to be reduced to improve water quality? And also we can look into the future. A mathematical model is like an experiment, a virtual simulation tool. So you can do experiments in the virtual environment that you can't do in real life, to ask questions and estimate, for example, how much worse will things get with population growth or climate change. So you can perturb the system once you have a model. So that's primarily what I do at my job now. We use different models at different scales for different kinds of problems. And the one you see here is just one of them. And this is my last slide. We were also asked to talk a little bit about our sense of belonging, and it's, just caring about what I do and the consequence of my work makes, it gives me a sense of belonging, being valued for who I am and my contributions and potential, having agency over my career and the things that I want to do or explore. Having a job that, allows me to remain curious and to intellectually challenged. And then always just the people around you, and having shared values. So I feel like if any one of these, you can't always have all these things, but any one of them missing from the equation can make you feel less like you belong maybe in that space. It doesn't mean, I think the key isn't that you have to love every minute of it, but if you care about what you do, you have this intrinsic sense of motivation. And I like to phrase it as feeling like I'm part of the ecosystem. So that is all I have.
Yeah, Andrea, do you have any questions? I really like letting the panelists ask each other questions before we get started. And Tazeen, thank you so much, because I didn't read the little blurb, but basically you covered it for me, that we as scientists have many different identities. Any human being has many, many identities. So I really appreciated your graphic, and that's what this series is about, right? To talk about all those identities and how we work with them and engage with them in our job. So, but I'm going to open it up, if Andrea, if you have any questions for Tazeen.
Sure. Yeah. The big thing on my mind right now is how tough it is to pick what you want to do with your life. And you shared some slides with, you and your sister as children, and then your own children that way, and interest in science as children. But, when you were in college trying to decide what to do, it seems like you've really found something that's a great calling for you. And so how did you make that choice to go in that direction?
I didn't actually know environmental science was a field I could study when I entered college. I went to the British schooling system, and early on I had to, I think when you're about 14, you have to narrow down some subjects. And I stopped taking chemistry. And at that time I was like, I am eliminating a future in science, right? Because that's, if I'd continued in the British system, I would have gone away. I think it was 16 actually. And that's pretty early to have that option be eliminated. And so when I moved to the US, I was like, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that I quit chemistry. I could take it again. And I think the moment was, I think I just took an environmental studies 101 class, and I was taking the biology series. And at the same time, I was taking a wetlands class. And I was having a really hard time picking which part of science I was excited about. And they were talking about learning about the kidney and how efficient the kidney is. Like just organs are just so efficient in giving you the nutrients you need, taking out the waste you don't need. And I was like, that's like a wetland. And the whole like a wetland is nature's kind of kidney, where it takes in sometimes dirty water and gives you clean water. And that's what wastewater treatment plants are modeled after, is some of the wetland processes. And I think environmental science allowed me to not have to pick between chemistry and biology and physics, because when you're studying a freshwater ecosystem, especially, once I learned that I could later do environmental engineering, I needed the physics to learn how water moves and how to calculate flows. And I needed the chemistry to learn about like photosynthesis and how different things and toxic contaminants or things get diluted or whatever, and then biology is like the critters that we're trying, the aquatic health. So it was just seemed like a perfect interdisciplinary approach that was what I was looking for without knowing that I was looking for it.
I absolutely love that analogy that wetlands are the kidneys of like the environment. You just opened my eyes. I do want to say real quick, I plugged the community ambassador program. There are 2 community ambassadors here that are helping us out with the questions and answers, the Q&A, and it's Jill Davishall, and I used her name as an example earlier, who's the community ambassador for engineering, and Suzanne Lee, who's the community ambassador for biology. And if you all could put like a link in there about the program, that would be really cool for the audience. But we would like to continue the series, like I said in the beginning, and our next speaker is Andrea Frost. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your path into computer science?
Sure. Yeah, I don't have any slides, Tazeen. That was such an amazing presentation that you just gave us. But I did jot down a couple of your questions, so I'm going to recycle some of the things that you said. I guess first, where am I from? I think that's such an interesting question. I was born on the East Coast, and we moved to the West Coast after my dad died. So I came from one side of the country to the other, and that was a pretty big shift as a child. Where have I been? Or I guess saying where I'm from is really difficult because I'm from both Washingtons, Washington, D.C. and Washington State. And then I've lived a lot of other places too. So where I've been, I've actually been to all 50 states, and I've lived in a number of them. And I've been to something like 30 countries and hope to go to another 30 or 100 or whatever. But all those things absolutely shape my worldview and have shaped my worldview. And I feel really blessed that my parents got us out on the weekends to go camping and exploring in the woods and the forest and travel and stuff like that, so that I could start to see what things were like outside of the bubble of your hometown. I think that's a really important part of developing who we are. And then I was also thinking about assumptions while you were speaking, Tazeen, because there's so much that we can, that I think we tend to make a lot of assumptions about who people are. You see their job and and don't really often have the opportunity to know what it took to get there. So for me, my journey to computer science was pretty challenging. I went back to school in my 30s. I did a career change after being really sick after a trip to India and Nepal. And I had cholera and a bunch of other amoebic parasites, and I was very sick for a couple of years. And then I also had an injury to my leg, so I used to do wildland firefighting in Alaska, and I managed a restaurant, and I did all these jobs where I was outside and on my feet, and suddenly found myself not able to do any of that and wondering, what's my worth? Who am I? What's my identity now that I can't do all of those things anymore? So I came back to school thinking I was going to be a math teacher, but I took a computer science class, and I was just kind of had my mind blown and my eyes, open to this whole other world. And I saw a real absence of diversity in that space. And I was wondering, where's my seat at the table? Who's making the decisions about technology, the technology that rules our world? Like the maps that Tazeen shared from PNNL Labs, that's probably a computer scientist, I'm guessing, helped to generate those images. I just found myself, wondering if I get to help make decisions about where we take technology and the ethics that happen, and how do we prevent bias in software and all those things. So I found myself wanting a seat at the table. And that sort of end goal of wanting to be able to contribute to the world helped me to stay motivated in school when it was really hard and I thought about quitting. I think a big thing with computer science is I wanted to never be bored. I had a job where I was really understimulated, and I was so bored, and I just felt like it was going to be the death of me. So now I've swung completely in the opposite direction, where with computer science, I have perhaps too much challenge all the time, and sometimes wish that things were maybe there was a little more repetition or something. But the reality is that I love that I work in a very dynamic field where we're always learning and growing, and there's always an opportunity to make a difference. So I really care about security, cybersecurity, privacy. So now I have a job at Dell Technologies, where I get to do that in my job every day.
Did I say it wrong? Did
I think you said Dell Engineering or something
Oh,
else.
yeah, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to open it up with Tazine if you have any questions for Andrea. I do want to applaud you though. I actually was teaching at Western when Andrea was going back to school, and you worked so hard, and she did so many things. She did so many like outreach events and helped out other students. And when Tazine was talking about belonging, and we asked that actually, Andrea spent so much time making sure not only she felt like she was creating a space where she belonged, but also the other students. So I just want to say thank you to that, because you did so much. But I'm going to let Tazine ask a question too.
I know you're pretty involved, or at least have been, with STEM and computer science and getting young girls, middle schoolers. So I was wondering, I have two girls and they both have different interests, but what have you, from your experience with the young kids, seen to cultivate some of the things that you wish what do you wish somebody had told you that you now tell the kids you interact with when you were 7, 8, 9, 10?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, I think it's so important that young people have visibility of different options that are out there. So I think that, I realized after being in school, I went to a conference and realized I'd never really met anybody who had a PhD. Like, besides my teachers in college, like I had no friend, maybe I did have friends, but I didn't know, like, and then suddenly I saw all these other people that looked like me and that had all these PhDs. And I was just like, oh, now I can see that that's an option for me. So I think that when I was younger, if I had maybe been exposed to panels like this, or just sort of seeing other women and people doing those things, it plants a seed that has the potential then to grow into something so much more if you show them that those opportunities exist. Yeah, and I did help run a middle school tech program for girls for 5 years. And but I will say one problem there is that the pipeline is not exactly there. So finding, like, if igniting the spark can be so hard to do, but then there also has to be some kind of follow through, some kind of pathway where you can continue cultivating that interest as they grow older, and finding ways that that the topic is interesting to them is so important. So like maybe that's music, or so like, I used to tutor math to some young women, and it wasn't actually about the math where they were struggling. It was more about how to tie the math to something that they cared about. So I would say that the same is true with your children, or any children. If they have an interest and you can find a way to tie it to the science in some way and show them, like your presentation did a great job with that, like showing like, this is how I came to this conclusion, how I came to follow this path here. And so I think the more that we can help guide children to kind of think about like the science, like, what did it take to make this graph? Like, whoa, that graph is so cool with all those colors and it's like kind of moving, and like what made that? Like, I don't know, let's go find out. And like your list of, like, be curious, be like, all those things are such important skills that help lean you like towards a science career. So yeah, I think just like finding a way to relate the science to something that they care about.
I love what you just said, Andrea, about like, it's okay to have different paths. That's why I kind of even dislike the term pipeline, because there isn't just one pipeline, right?
Yes.
I remember there was a book that said it's more like a circuit, like there's many paths. And I think it's really interesting that all of us are about the same age and we all took different paths, but we're all in science, and it took us some time. It took all of us some time to figure out what we really wanted and who we are and stuff. So I'm going to kind of add on to what Andrea said about planting that seed. So who planted that seed, or what, there might've been many seeds, many ideas that kind of made you. And I think Tazine, you talked a little bit about that, but is there like a story you'd like to share with our audience about like what made you kind of figure out who you are, choose this path? Anyone can go first.
Do you want to go first, Andrew?
What made me choose this path? Well, I will first start with my mom. My mom, I was raised by a single mom. My dad died, and my mom showed me that women can do anything. So there's a lot of times when people messaging that tells women that we can't do it, or people look at me and they're like, what, you're a computer scientist? And so I think that my mom showed me my whole life that women can do anything we put our mind to. So that was really great. And then for computer science, I really actually my brother is a software developer, and I was like in college and I wanted to be a math teacher because I was tutoring people, and my brother was like, you should take a computer science class because we did a lot of puzzles growing up, and it's a lot of puzzle solving, and you might really like that. So it was like I think environmental science it was like geology, computer science, physics, one of those things, but I chose the computer science one because my brother had said, the puzzles, you might like it because of the puzzles. And then I don't actually think that I liked it. Like, it was so hard, and but it stretched my brain so far that I wasn't ready to be done with it. And then the learning. So I guess maybe my immediate family turns out to have had a pretty strong influence, but also being in college and seeing all the other people and just being exposed to so many other things that I wouldn't have been exposed to before was really important.
I can definitely identify with it. Was really hard with physics, but I didn't feel like I was done. What about you, Tazeen? The seeds.
Yeah, I feel like the childhood seed was just seeing so many places and appreciating, ecosystems and spending time in them, enjoying them. Like, you first have to have a love for something before sometimes you want to study it. And just that love was there, and that kind of awe. And my dad was a loyal National Geographic subscriber. We never had the kids magazines, so I didn't even know they existed growing up. And so, I probably wasn't reading them when I was 6 or 7, but mostly as a teen, I would read like every month. I'd be so excited. And I was like, I want to be either the journalist writing those science stories, or maybe the science, like I didn't really think, I just wanted to write things. I enjoyed writing too. And so environmental journalism was kind of in the back of my mind, which I picked Western because they had an environmental journalism degree. And then I came here and I found environmental science, and I was like, okay, I don't have to be the one writing them, but maybe I'll be in them one day. And then when I finally picked environmental science, like, it was just the combination of being outside and being able to collect field data and being able to do things with that data in the computer, on the lab, on graph paper. Like, it was just there was so many ways to interact with that science that was exciting. And I had one professor who kind of perked my interest in environmental engineering, which I hadn't thought about. And my first job out of college was at the Department of Ecology. And I had an amazing mentor who was an environmental engineer. And she kind of saw my aptitude for the math part of environmental science. And, I got on a project where they mentored me using a model. And I was like, hey, I am doing this stuff, but the engineers are getting paid a lot more for it. So I think I need to go back and get an engineering degree. So, it wasn't just because I wanted to be compensated to do the things that I could do, but I also wanted to have a bigger sort of like, scientists kind of study the world as it is. And I felt like engineers can kind of envision the world as it could be. And that's not my quote. I think there's like a Hungarian mathematician that I read the quote from that I'm rephrasing, so I won't claim that as my own. But I just liked the idea that we've done so much damage to ecosystems, and that I saw engineering as a tool to kind of redesign the way we interact with the earth to work more with nature and ecological functions. That was kind of my inspiration. It was not like to build dams or highways, or it was more, how can we use these engineering tools to restore, and, knowing the ecology, how can we kind of undo some of these human impacts? So.
I want to encourage the audience again. We're going to be here till about 6:30. So if you want to ask questions, please use the Q&A button. But Tazy, when you said that about like, you want to use engineering to like really counteract and try to help the problems humans have already done to our ecosystems. And then Andrew was talking about like computer science and bias that's in like facial recognition and like AI and credit and all that stuff. And so you went into these fields for these reasons that you're passionate about, and you're supporting the public. You really are. Andrew, you're supporting the public's privacy, and Tazeen, you're supporting the public's like access and like our world, basically our ecosystems. Who's supporting you both? Like as you're going through school, as you're doing your job and trying to do all that stuff, where are you all getting support? Because I think that that's really important, and we as scientists don't really take the time to share how we're going through the world and not like being super burnt out. So how do you get support?
Are you talking about right now or in the past?
Either. You can talk about both. We can talk about the past first. How about that? We'll talk about the past support first, and then we'll talk about now support next.
I think in terms of past, I mean, I guess in terms of the stereotype model minority, there's certain parts of that do ring true. And my parents were like, if I got a question wrong on a test, they wouldn't be like, oh yes, you got like everything right but one. They'd be like, why did you get that one wrong? And I'm not recommending perfectionism, but there was just really high expectations, but it wasn't done in a stern way. I think my dad, just with his travels, him and my mom, it was not typical of Indian families in Kenya when I was growing up. And we were kind of, unique, or they were unique in the way they parented and encouraged us. And they moved here because of higher education and the opportunities that they knew we would not otherwise have had we stayed in Kenya. They might have had the option to send us overseas, but they're like, we're not sending our girls halfway across the world without us. We're going with them. And so, I mean, I would say that they always, had confidence enough in us and invested in education. It was always a priority. And I felt a huge responsibility to kind of, to the sacrifices they made. I don't think moving here was great for my dad's career or my mom's sense of well-being and family, but they never regret it when they see me and my sisters, and that's a big deal. So that's kind of the past. Is I feel like they were always had my back, and then I interacted with professors at Western. There were a few that just they showed me things that I didn't know existed, and were just they had so much enthusiasm. It wasn't as much the content, but the enthusiasm with which they taught, that I was like, these people really care about this. And, I'd just be excited to listen to them. So I'll answer the now question later.
Yeah. Andrea, what about the past? Who supported you to get to where you are?
Yeah, it's changed a lot over time. What I have needed has changed a lot over time. So when I first started computer science, it was so just technically challenging. I didn't know what anything was with computers. I just was like never exposed to it, but I was in school with people who've been doing it since they were 10, so I felt very overwhelmed. So partly I needed actual, like homework help. Like, how do I catch up to all these people who are already done with the assignment? And I don't even understand the instructions. Like, and then also just like, I needed friendship, and because I looked around the room and I didn't really feel like I belonged there. And so I just started looking for other people who helped me feel that sense of belonging. So I got really active in the Association for Women in Computing, SACNIS. I met Regina, and there we ran into each other again, and got to know about some of the other cool clubs on campus, and got to work with people, collaborate with other departments, and so those things all really help to sort of build a network of people who all want to see you succeed. So I think that that's like a huge part, is like to surround yourself with people who want to see you succeed. And then when you're having a hard day or something, they'll help give you that little nudge to keep going. Like my mom continues to be an immensely important person in my life. And my first computer science class, I got a C on my midterm. And my reaction was like, well, I'm no good at this. I don't like, so I better drop out now. Like I thought about dropping the class and my mom was like, no, like you can like dig your heels in and like, you know, that happened to me once in school too. And I turned it around and you can too. And so and then, you know, I aced my final. I got like a, you know, I did very well on my final. So, you know, yeah, I think that's what I needed in the beginning. And then just that yeah, seeing other people like me and being able to, you know, have a shoulder to cry on sometimes when you're just having a bad day. And then also people to kind of push you and challenge you, like, you know, don't give up, keep going. And you can make a difference. I think that what Tazine said earlier too about having that sense of purpose, I think that's important in school as well, to remember why you're doing it. Like, because so just finding people who want to support you in that purpose and support you in your success, that if you surround yourself with those people, then, you know, I think you'll make it further. I made it further because of those things.
Well, Tazine, yeah, so let's talk about current, like, I do like what Andrea said, like we get older and then we forget like why we even went into the sciences. So like who helps you remember that and who supports you now?
I think my kids help me remember. Sometimes it's like, just, you know, why do I do what I do? And, you know, especially when it comes to Earth and so many like dire things happening to it, it's easy to be like, well, this one little project I'm doing isn't going to solve climate change, or isn't going to, you know, might make this one little creek better, but there's so many worse ones in other parts of the world. So it can feel kind of like, well, it doesn't make a difference. But I just think that having kids, you have to pair that with hope, because, you know, if you don't have that, then you don't really have much left. And that is the kind of a driving factor for me personally. They're not really supporting me. They're probably distracting me sometimes, but in a philosophical way, they're supporting my pursuit of science and passion. And I think one of the things I was looking at in my career as I was preparing for this is that when I graduated from college, I worked for the Department of Ecology, and I worked in the modeling unit that does these pollution studies. And then I went to grad school for 2 years, and I came back and worked for 3 months for the same unit. And then I went traveling to India and Nepal, and I came back and I worked for the same unit. And I was like, I have only worked for the Department of Ecology since I graduated. And there's a really good reason for that. It's because I feel valued. It's because my supervisors, maybe both of them have been women. I have the flexibility that I need when I need it. I feel like I can grow. I feel like I can ask or say, and I don't think this is true for everybody at the Department of Ecology. This is my unique experience in the team that I work with. And I feel really lucky and privileged to have that. And I know people have experienced toxic work environments and things where they like the work, but the people don't jive, or they like the people, but the work isn't interesting. And I feel like it's almost like, that's why I haven't moved, you know? And there's also, you know, government employees, there's so many of us where I'm like, oh yeah, I've worked here for like 30 years. And I was like, I'm never going to be one of those people, but here I am, and I'm not at 30 years, but I can see I guess I have a little bit more respect for the reasons that people stay, instead of thinking that they're boring and they don't want new challenges, because it's a community. It's not an insignificant amount of time that you spend at work. And while people might say, oh, it's just work, you shouldn't prioritize, work and life, like a work-life balance. Like, I don't think it's an either or thing. It's part of your life. And it's important that it's part of that in a positive, it is, positive impact in space. But I also think that if you're stuck in a place where those things are not happening, it doesn't mean you, as Andrea said, you don't quit, but you are worth something else. It's worth pursuing opportunities where you can feel like that. And sometimes you have to be in a place that doesn't feel like that for a little while to find it. So I would say, like, just professionally, I feel supported. And then just in my life outside of work, I'm involved in other things. And I feel like my family and my husband, they support me in giving me the time and space I need to do the hobbies and the activism that I care about. So.
we'll come back to that because I am the community ambassadors that are helping with the questions, and please put your questions in there. But Suzanne and Jill, if you have questions, please put them in the chat as well. I tell them, if you can't have at least one hobby and have a job and have at least one hobby, then you're working too hard. So, one of the community ambassadors was like, oh no, now I have to get a hobby because Regina told me I have to. But I was like, just get one hobby. Because yeah, I agree with you. It's not it's okay to have good support at work, and it's okay to have your identity tied to your work, but you also need something outside. So I'm going to come back to that. But Andrea, who's your community? What network did you create now to support you?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to it. One is that because I do care so much about security and privacy, I want to be in the know. I want to know how it works. I want to know how I can help make it better. So that means surrounding myself with people who also care about those things. So conferences and things like that have been really great for meeting other people, being exposed to other ideas, keeping it interesting, getting out of your seat in your office and like seeing something different and just kind of picking your head up and looking around a little bit. And then the other piece for me has instead of sort of receiving mentorship, I try to give mentorship now a lot more. So I run a number of women in tech groups and basically field questions, like help get people next to each other, and then field questions that people have when they're just getting started or making career changes, or just kind of creating a space where women in tech, because we are still a minority, where we can come together and share resources and be exposed to one another and just share successes, share our struggles and brainstorm on what to do. And those spaces give me so much, I guess partly it helps me feel like I've come a long ways. Because sometimes it feels like, like I don't know anything, or, but then it's like, no, actually, I know a lot. But, you just get so fixated on the work that you're on right here. So I just really love working with other people, collaborating with other people. So I try to be involved in things that help me meet other people and share resources.
So Tazeen, you'd mentioned activism and hobbies. Is that similar to what Andrew was just talking about?
A little bit. I like being outside, and a few years ago I decided I was going to climb Mount Baker, and so that in trying to climb Mount Baker, I practiced by climbing Ruth Mountain, and since then I've done Mount Adams, and I hope we do Mount St. Helens, and so all that means I have to go hiking a lot to keep, so that it's not painful when I actually go. And it's just, it's just a way to also spend time with my friends hiking outside. And we're just so lucky in Bellingham to have access to that literally in our backyards. So that's one of my great hobbies, both with family, often without family. It's just a way to just, relax. It's a meditation and it's physical exercise, both. And then in terms of activism, I'm a Muslim, and I've participated in interfaith activities locally. And more recently, I co-founded a group called Whatcom Care, Whatcom Coalition for Anti-Racist Education. And we are here to support and advocate for anti-racist education in K-12 public schools. I co-founded it last year, and that's kind of taking up, it's new, so it's taking up a lot of free time, but we're all volunteers, and we're just parents and teachers and community members trying to, be like, how can we teach honest history? How can we make conversations about race with kindergartners normal, instead of having it be something that you first hear about in college? Or how can we learn about the history right here, the racial history of Bellingham and Washington State? And so it's just, we're trying to think, both support educators who haven't started this journey, who are on this journey, and advocate for changes in schools. So those are some of my, I wouldn't say it's not necessarily a hobby, but it's a passion. And yeah.
Jill or Suzanne, if you could find the link to that and put it in the chat, that would be awesome.
It's www.whatcomcare.org, CARE.
That's awesome. I can't believe I don't know about this. So I'm going to look it up. It's pretty new.
I think the Google SEO searches or whatever aren't finding it yet. So maybe Andrew can fix that.
Okay. Yeah, Andrea can fix that for us.
She's like, that's not my specialty.
We have about 10 minutes left. There's a couple questions that I have from our community ambassadors, but I wanted to let you talk to each other. Do you have any questions for each other before I ask these questions?
I don't have a question right now, but I did jot down something that I wanted to mention from the Spark earlier, because there was a really important piece of motivation for me for choosing computer science that I didn't mention, but one was actually financial motivation, because I was like really broke when I was sick, and I was like, how did I end up here? And I now, as an engineer, experience financial empowerment. And I feel like it's not talked about enough. So I think that by choosing a career in science, you can open the door to higher salaries, certainly than I had prior to doing computer science. And that allows me to own my own house and travel and do all and pursue the hobbies that I want to do without worrying about money as much as I did in the past. So I wanted to mention that there was a financial component to my choice for computer science, because I heard you could make X amount of money when you graduate, and that there were so many jobs. So I wanted that. I wanted to have a lot of job options, and I wanted to make a decent amount of money, or not be just struggling all the time financially. And then the other thing I had heard was that when you do computer science, you can work from anywhere in the world, like a beach in Bali or something. And it turns out that like working from the beach is not super practical, because there's a lot of glare on the monitor. but in theory, with jobs in computer science, like working remotely is totally possible. I'm full-time remote. So I just wanted to mention that in case other people are looking for similar motivation.
I think that's really important. I think people mention money sometimes, especially with engineering. Tazeen was talking about engineering, but I think some people think it's crass to talk about it. But hey, like being financially stable is something that I think every human deserves, and I'm glad you brought that up. Tazeen, is there anything, not necessarily a question, but something that you'd like to share before I get to these last two questions?
Yeah, I'd like to add on that money thing. I mean, I think also you've invested so much in the education that you have, and often that comes with loans. I'm still paying some of my student loans, and I did my master's at Stanford, and I got pretty starry-eyed when I received that letter. And sometimes I regret it because of the loans I have now. And I'm like, I probably would have had the same job. Maybe it'll be different if I start looking for a new job. Maybe that will make me stand out from other candidates, but it doesn't affect my current job as much, especially like now 10, 12, 15 years after the degree. So if people are concerned, don't get too fixated on the school. It has to be something. I loved my experience there. I don't regret going, but I do sometimes think about alternative financial choices and the opportunity cost of that. So it's easy to make decisions when you're younger that are not fully financial. Financial literacy. I don't know. It should be part of high school.
I agree. And that's something I think Andrea has actually mentioned, and a lot of us faculty have mentioned to other students, and about like going into the sciences. A lot of grad schools are paid for, but sometimes it's paid for only half, and then you have to take out loans. I got a master's degree in San Diego, which was more of a terminal master's. So I did get a stipend, but it was only really covered half of my living expense. So I did have to take out loans. So yeah, just being very conscious about those things is, yeah, talk to a faculty member, talk to somebody who's been down that path. Connect with Andrea, who connects you with mentors or something, so that you can talk to somebody, because I agree. I don't like paying for loans. I just paid mine off to Western, and I teach there. So I'm going to ask you these two questions. We have about 6 minutes left. One is for Tazeen, one's for Andrea. For Tazeen, you've kind of answered this already, actually, but we're going to maybe another way to think about it. Your life journey has brought you to so many places in the world. Do you think these journeys have influenced your approach and your perspectives in your work? And if so, how?
I think it's definitely influenced. Like there's very little that frazzles me in terms of what people say or how people think. Like I've seen so many different ways of being and so many different cultures that, sometimes when you're talking about the environment or a problem, they can be some pretty polarized views, or persistent people repeating the same thing or trying to like take down your science or whatever. And it just doesn't faze me. And I also can remain respectful. Like even though some cases you just need to speak up. Like I feel like I can navigate that without it. I don't take it personally, and I can also appreciate an alternative perspective as being valid, even if it's not something my gut is like, oh no, that can't be right. And then I'm reminded, actually, maybe it can be right. Maybe I'm not seeing something, and I'm missing a perspective. So just kind of, not always having to react and being able to kind of synthesize. It affects how you interact with people, and people skills are important. They're very, very valuable in the workplace and outside the workplace. So.
I love that you said that, and I want to give our listeners and our watchers. Sorry, I have a podcast, so I'm like our listeners, but I want to give them an example because I teach a science communication class, and let's talk about the vaccine. There are people that are being resistant to getting the vaccine, and there's many different reasons. I think we as educators are like, no, they're dumb, and they should get the vaccine, but there are people who are communities of color, especially the Black communities, who have been not treated really well by our government and by medical institutions and have been used, right? And there's also, I was just talking to a student who is Mexican American, and her mother is a nurse, and she was charged for the vaccine. And so she got a bill. And so the student was like, I don't want to get a bill. I can't afford it. I don't have insurance, so they're going to bill me. So there are these reasons that, like you just said, you have to listen and be like, oh, that is a reasonable fear, right? And I can help you. Maybe like we can call that person and be like, this is not a bill you should be paying, right? And so we have to listen more to these, like you said, these polarizing things. Sometimes it might be what you think, but sometimes it might not be, right? And so I love the answer. You're awesome. We have a couple minutes left, and I'm going to ask Andrea's question. You mentioned that when you were pursuing your studies, you sometimes felt like you didn't like what you were doing. What kept you going, and how did you know you should keep going?
Oh, I really wanted what came in the end. I wanted the job, and I wanted to take my life in a different direction. And because it was my second time in school, so my undergrad is in German. I have a German degree. I speak German, and I got to live in Europe for a few years. And but then when I found myself sort of at 30, like injured and broken leg, and just kind of like, what do I do now? I felt really like I had my hands tied behind my back, and what am I worth? And so I knew I could do it, and I wanted to have the jobs that came in the end. So even though I was like, man, this is so hard, or it stretched my brain so far, but I knew that I had it in me to do it, and I wanted the jobs that came in the end. I wanted the seat at the table, and I wanted to be able to participate in the conversations about where we take our lives with technology, rather than having other people dictate that to us. So now I have that, now I am at that table. I have a seat at lots of tables, and I am now offering a seat to others as well, and making sure that more diverse perspectives are brought into the circle and into the conversation. So I feel really good about that. And when I was in school, I just kept imagining what came in the end, like me walking across the stage and getting my diploma, which, like, ironically, there's no diploma like in there. They don't actually they hand you an empty book. But like I kept imagining that moment of like crossing the stage and how good I'll feel when I'm done.
I want to thank both of you for being our first Humanizing STEM event. I think both of you are amazing. And just to add to what Andrea was saying about like, that success that she was seeing, that she was like, I can do it. Like, I think students and even faculty and staff are going to look at this and be like, look at what they've accomplished, and they've gotten there. And we really enjoyed your story. So thank you so much for being willing to share them.
Thank you for having us. I
Thanks
just
for
want to add
having
one
us.
more thing. I went to an event and they were like, we don't want to bring you, we don't just want to give you a seat at the table. We want you to help us build the table. And I think that that's kind of what Andrea's done by, she's building the table. And, you know, I think we should all be part of building the tables that we sit at.
Absolutely.